BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. This episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Rep Sports and Raze Energy. Are you a fan of energy drinks, protein shakes, and health foods? Well, I sure am. I use the stuff almost every single day. They sell Raze Energy products at my local gym, but you can have them shipped to your home. Use the coupon code NED075, that's NED075, for discounts applied at the checkout. The link is in the description box. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Monday, another Zodiac Monday. Welcome to the show. First, I would like to begin with a couple of quick announcements. I hope everybody had a good weekend, and thank you to those who watched the video on the Debunking series. On the weekends, I do a segment talking about some Zodiac Killer suspects whom I think absolutely were not the Zodiac Killer, or at the very least there's a low probability. And last weekend I did one on the suspect Lawrence Kane. Alright, thank you to everyone who watched that. And last week I started a new ongoing series for this channel called The Linkletter Connection, and that came out on Friday, but the next episode is going to be coming out on Wednesday, Zodiac Killer, The Linkletter Connection, which is going to be examining two major questions. The first is, was Robert Linkletter the Zodiac Killer? And was his sister, Diane Linkletter, murdered, or did she commit suicide? I know I said that like 3 questions, but really it's what really happened to Diane Linkletter. That's the second question. And during that episode, I said that there was an honorary question. I think that default is a better term than honorary. The next question by default is, was Diane Linkletter a victim of the Zodiac Killer? Diane Linkletter passed away on October 4th of 1969, and what happened to her is a mystery to some. The mainstream narrative is that she committed suicide by jumping out of a 6th-floor window in Hollywood, California, but I'm going to be continuing that discussion on Wednesday, and Friday will be the return of Anything Goes Friday, where any subject is fair game. Yes, I wish I could talk to you guys every day. I absolutely love doing the daily segments. That's me. I mean, that's how I did the show for years, trying to just share with you guys whatever I was learning about in the true crime world, because I'm somebody who just watches documentaries and listens to podcasts and reads books just like anybody else, and then I would do a short YouTube segment just talking about it and responding to you guys in the comments section and taking requests sometimes. And I wish I could keep doing that, but life off of the internet is going to be taking up a little bit more time. So while I had the ability to do so, I was trying to post every day, and I wish that there were just more hours in the day, my friends, because I was just sitting down at the computer today, and all of a sudden, it's like the whole power grid went up, and I was like, oh, I want to start a new ongoing series for Black Box Online Radio. I know I'm doing the one about the Linkletter Connection, but I know exactly what I would talk to you guys about. However, as I said, there just aren't enough hours in the day. So please feel free to subscribe to the channel, and you can follow along with the link letter connection, which I'll be doing on Wednesdays, Anything Goes Friday, Debunking series on the weekend, and of course Zodiac Mondays, which you are listening to now. And some genuine Zodiac Killer news is that on the Zodiac Killer channel there will be a new interview with Druzer coming out. There's something called the Zodiac Killer Interview with the Experts series, which I'm also the host of, and that is a program where we talk to mostly published writers and podcast hosts and people who have shared a lot of their theories. But we wanted to talk to someone from the forum communities or someone who was very familiar with the Zodiac Killer websites and who had just shared a lot of things on the internet circuit. So we reached out to Druzer to see if he would come on the show to talk about his Zodiac theories, and you can hear all about that on the Zodiac Killer channel. You can subscribe to that one too. I would invite you to do so, and why not? And finally, while this is a Zodiac Killer news report that I will be talking to you about, I also received a lot of questions from you guys from the St. Patrick's Day episode, which came out last weekend, as well as some questions that came in on older episodes, which are not Zodiac related, but as I said, because of the time constraints and devoting Wednesday to the link letter connection, at the end of the episode, I don't mind sticking around to just stay and chat for a while. I'll respond to some of your questions. On Wednesdays, I used to do the AMA, the Ask Me Anything, where any question was fair game, any subject was welcome in that one. So after the Zodiac material, please feel free to just stick around and chat for a while. Now, the first piece of info that I would like to share with you is called The Interesting Solution to the Z13 Cipher. And this was from Andrew WVA, who sent this into the email. Anybody can write the show at BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. And Andrew says, "Hello, Ned. Have you seen this proposed solution to the Z13? I tried to put the links in your YouTube comments section, but I think it was auto-deleted. I think it's very interesting to see how the numbers match up to give us Gaikowski's date of birth and age in 1970. Maybe this could be discussed in one of your future podcasts. Anyway, it seemed newsworthy." And this did come out several months ago, but I do appreciate Andrew sending that in, because it's a solution to the Z13 that I had never seen before. So to answer that first question, no, I was unfamiliar with this, and while I haven't thought super highly of Richard Gaikowski as a Zodiac Killer suspect in the past, I do confess that there are lots of clues, or I'm tempted to say the word circumstantial evidence that points in his direction, but I think clues or suggestions would be a better label than circumstantial evidence. But with the solution to the Z13, we see that we have AEN, the zodiac symbol, the number 8, K8, M8, Aries, that's the what I used to call the butt cheek symbol, NAM. But yes, the 8s all have circles around them, and this is a mathematical variant by looking at the alphanumeric value, for lack of a better term. A is the first letter of the alphabet, so it is a 1. E is the fifth letter of the alphabet, so it is a 5. But you see the letter N there, that is a 14, and you only put the 1 on the top line and the 4 on the bottom line, and so on. So it gives Richard Gaikowski's age at the time this was mailed, 34, and then it gives his birthday, March 14th. And where do we begin with that, really? I just want to point out that this is not the only mathematical signature that is tied to Richard Gaikowski. In that, there's also the car door from Lake Berryessa. The Zodiac Killer committed the Lake Berryessa stabbing on September 27th of 1969, when he attacked Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard. He was wearing the costume, he had a gun, a knife, pre-cut lengths of rope. The only time the Zodiac Killer wore that famous hood, the only crime that was committed during the daytime, and the only time that the victims were stabbed. Then the Zodiac walked from the site of the stabbing to Brian Hartnell's carbon Ghia and wrote a message on the car door that had the Zodiac symbol, the dates of Zodiac activity, and the word Vallejo on top, actually. as well as the words by knife. Now, there's a very odd peculiarity about the corridor at Lake Berryessa, because the Zodiac wrote out the dates of activity: 12/20/68 for the Lake Herman Road murders, the first crime; 7/4/69 for the Blue Rock Springs shooting, the second crime. But with the Lake Berryessa crime, instead of writing 9/27/69, the Zodiac wrote Sept 27/69 and added in the time of the crime at 6:30. And I don't remember who shared this with me, or else I would give you a shout out by name, but they said perhaps that was done because that 27/69 6:30 totals up to what number? 33. And Richard Gaikowski would have been 33 at the time. Is he leaving signatures behind? That's what I was talking about with clues, or suggestions, perhaps, or possibilities. This isn't the first one, and I can't simply say that this solution is incorrect, other than the fact that I don't have any way of debunking it until we actually get some type of verification, because with something like a 13-symbol cipher, the fewer the symbols, the more difficult it is to prove. I mean, there are so many solutions to the Z13 cipher. There's one of them that is even just connect the dots, because there are 13 letters in that, and then maybe that refers to some type of Zodiac correspondence where you're supposed to connect the dots and you can reveal the killer's identity. So there are lots of those out there. But I do want to point out something about this birthday of March 14th, 314. That is also an abbreviation for the number pi, 3.14. And of course, pi isn't actually 3.14. As I said, that is the abbreviated version. And it's often referred to as Pi Day, right? March 14th. Sometimes they give pizza specials for pizza, pie, and so on. I think you guys must get those emails in your spam box. I sure do. But I believe it was Ray Grant who was the person who noticed that you could use the alphanumeric value of pi to get the word Zodiac. For example, the Z is the 26, and the O is a 15 in there, and the numbers will match up to pi. So again, is that something that is tied to Richard Gaikowski? I simply do not know. I do confess there are lots of mathematical abnormalities that point in his direction, but I would also be very curious why somebody like Richard Gaikowski would choose to include these into the Zodiac Killer mystery, because Gaik was a former Army medic, he was a newspaperman, and I mean, where is his exact background in mathematics, and why would he choose to leave mathematical signatures, which wouldn't necessarily immediately tie him, or it's not something that could be easily solved and always leaves this place of guesswork. But when I discussed this once with Tom Voigt, simply as sending in questions about Gaikowski, many of them were written by you guys for an AMA in the past, and you can hear that one on Zodiac Richard Gaikowski AMA. He said very clearly, I don't know why Geik did what he did. He was a strange guy. He was an inconsistent person. And there are two responses to that. First, Tom Voigt sent me a photo of a document that Geik had written out in the 1980s when he was writing the word yes to answer questions. And in one of them, he spelled it with two S's. I mean, he just did things that were inconsistent, abnormal, and were all over the map, so to speak. I wish I hadn't used that expression because I think some people are going to jump to conclusions. But I said there was a second thing that was shared with me, and that is that Geik was self-taught in computers during the 1980s as well as later on. And he just was very apt with things like technology, and technology isn't too far away from things like engineering and mathematics. But what do you think about any of these things? And I would like to invite that as a challenge question. I mean, I would like to invite you to answer that challenge question. Do you think that these types of solutions and numerical clues are valuable, especially something like the corridor at Lake Berryessa? Is that meant to total up to somebody's age, or is this just hogwash? Is this just throwing mud against the wall and seeing what's going to stick? And if you were to say the latter, I don't mind. I won't fault you for that. I won't challenge you in a harsh way, because if you think that that's just an impractical way of looking at things, and you might be saying that, well, every Zodiac killer suspect is going to have some type of mathematical coincidence. I have a whole episode called Zodiac Killer Can't Count the Symbols because so many people try to solve the Z13 by taking a suspect's name who has 13 letters in it, and they're like, okay, this guy's the Zodiac Killer because he has 13 letters in his name, like Edward Edwards, for example. But in that episode, I show the amount of suspects that either have 13 letters in their name or they could have a variant of their name with 13 letters. It's really off the charts, literally and metaphorically. And now to share something that is even older than this possible solution to the Z13 cipher. Somebody left a comment on an episode that I did back in 2019 called The Murder of Paul Stine. It was one of those old-fashioned black box recordings when there was literally just a black box on the screen. That's why the show was called BlackBoxOnlineRadio. And I saw 2 comments that were left by an individual named Dave M. These are older comments, actually, that were left at the time the episode was first aired. And this is different than the one I was just referencing. But I read off one of Dave M's comments in an episode from last year when I did something about the murder of Paul Stine. I did an episode, rather. And Dave M's first comment, I'll just read the abridged version. The biggest problem with the Zodiac Killer is this. There was no such person. It's a myth. Started and perpetuated by the San Francisco Chronicle. And I simply asked Dave M to provide an explanation for that. The Zodiac Killer is a myth perpetuated by the San Francisco Chronicle, and why do you think that? And why specifically is the Chronicle the origin of this Zodiac Killer myth? This is the basic concept of there was no Zodiac Killer, and the Chronicle made up a fake news story. I read off Dave M's full comment in my episode, The Murder of Paul Stine Q&A session, but here's another comment from Dave M, and it says, Black Box Online Radio. Let's put it as simply as this. Well, over 100 years ago, Mark Twain said, if you don't read the newspaper, you're uninformed. If you do read it, you're misinformed. Intelligent people don't argue with that sentiment. You have to accept that it's a given, if you don't stop reading now. Fact, 150 years ago, during the Jack the Ripper spree, news agencies were receiving literally hundreds of confession letters. Newspapers were just coming into prominence with a worldwide audience. Remembering that the object of any business is to earn money, those killings, letters, etc. were absolute gold to them. There were many murders in Whitechapel during that same period, but the Ripper murders captured the imagination of the readers. Arguably the most famous of those letters, the Dear Boss letter, which is signed Yours Truly, Jack the Ripper, hence the name, has been proved to be a hoax. In fact, it was proved to be a hoax in 1925 when the still-living newspaperman confessed to writing it for the purpose of keeping the story alive. Yet in the year 2019, some people want to believe it was real. Why? Because they want it to be real. Whether it was real or not is irrelevant to them. So let's fast forward to 1969. Are we to act on faith that newspapers had progressed to the point that people weren't being misinformed anymore? The San Francisco Chronicle wanted to sell newspapers. That's their business. Let's look at how many people were, say, 20 plus years old in 1969 and are still living. I was 15 years old in California and my dad was 58 when the Chronicle reported that the Hardins first solved the 408 cipher. Many declared him some type of genius, just as many did not. But 50 years later, those naysayers are all dead. They are no more than old-timers left to debunk and to force the message down our throats for the last 50 years. Getting back to my dad and Don Hardin, he said, so the guy who solved it lives right there in the area? It's obvious the guy who solved it is the guy who wrote it. Now that doesn't mean Hardin killed anybody. Paul Avery and other San Francisco Chronicle reporters became famous in their own right. So in conclusion, just like Jack the Ripper 50 years ago, the only thing that changed was the date. The letters are fake and the crimes are separate. And who's going to come out 50 years after the fact and say, we were wrong? There's too much writing on it being real. I could elaborate much more, but to what end? People are going to believe what they want to believe. and they want to believe that there was a quote-unquote Zodiac killer. It's a lot more exciting than the truth, right? But is believing there was a Zodiac that it was actually harming anyone? Excuse me, let me rephrase that. But is believing there was a Zodiac actually harming anyone? Which is more important, the truth or the Zodiac? Or does it even matter anymore? Regards, Dave. Well, I do appreciate Dave's very well-worded comment, but when I was reading this one again, a lot has changed in the last 3 years. When I did that episode on the murder of Paul Stine. For starters, Dave, now I'm able to call you out on some of these radical claims, because I know that some of you guys are just about to jump out of your skin right now. Firstly, this whole thing here about how somebody in 1925, a still living newspaper man, confessed to writing the Dear Boss letter. Ah, my friend the expert, was that in 1925, or was that in 1931? You tell me, if indeed he's referring to the confession of Frederick Best, the guy who said that he fabricated not only the Dear Boss letter, mind you, but also the Saucy Jack postcard. And other than those little details, Dave's statement there is correct with the conventional theory that Frederick Best fabricated those two documents because he was working for a publication called The Star, and he wanted to keep it alive. Now, this whole thing, though, about why do people still think Jack the Ripper was real if somebody confessed to committing the forgeries and the confession was dated in whether it's 1925 or 1931, big deal, right? Okay, if some journalist came forward and said that he fabricated those writings, well, why do people still want to believe that in a Jack the Ripper? Because they want it to be real, whether or not it is real, it is irrelevant to them? No, absolutely not. I have a whole episode about this called There Was No Jack the Ripper, because when you actually read what people are saying, as I have done, it's because they dispute the Frederick Best confession, because they think that he was lying. Well, let's look at Dave's logic right here. Okay, the newspapers are receiving literally hundreds of confession letters. That's a direct quotation. Well, if they're receiving hundreds of confession letters, why are all of those wrong? But the only one that is correct is the one that supports your hypothesis. I mean, that is picking and choosing in the most literal sense of the words. I mean, talk about cherry picking to get a desired result. No, this is when I like to use the term pumpkin picking. Remember this, people. Pumpkin picking, not cherry picking. You know, like a cherry tree, right? You got to pick a few cherries here, a few cherries there. No, what some people do is pumpkin picking. They just walk out, they pick up one very big fact. Did I say big fact? One very big fact, and they just hold on to that, and they ignore all the other facts in the pumpkin patch. So, firstly, I mean, you have to take Frederick Best's word for it that he fabricated those letters. Why is he telling the truth and not all of these other people? And right now, I'm not trying to prove or disprove the Ripper hoax theory. The point is that it is not completely accepted by everyone, and people have their own reasons for believing in an alternative theory, and some people even say that it's not about belief, it's about following the facts, and the facts have pointed them toward a different subject. And whether it's Jack the Ripper or the Zodiac Killer, some people say that the reason why they don't believe that there's this media campaign going on by the newspapers is because they have a suspect, and they believe that this suspect was the person who committed those crimes, whether it's in Whitechapel or San Francisco. I was just talking about Richard Gaikowski. There are numerous people online who believe that Richard Gaikowski was the Zodiac Killer, and they have their own theory, and they have explanations and reasons why, and they can show you the Z13 cipher, or the car door at Lake Berryessa, or provide explanations about Geik. And I know I was being a little bit hard on Dave, and I really appreciate his very well-worded comment, but I also want to say to you guys that just because someone has worded a comment very well, just because someone has a very articulate narrative, it does not mean that they get all of the facts right all of the time. I make numerous mistakes here on Black Box Online Radio, but I did point out some of them in this very extensive post that 1925 or 1931, or that he only addresses one letter being fabricated when Frederick Best confessed to two of them, and perhaps some other things there. So sometimes people will jump on the bandwagon when it comes to a particular theory. Like, say, for example, last year, the case breakers came forward and say that Gary Francis Post was a Zodiac killer. And if you get on channels like the Infographics Show or maybe some other more pop culture oriented things about the Zodiac killer, you will see lots of people in the comment section saying that, okay, they now believe that Gary Francis Post was the Zodiac. But was Gary Post actually the Zodiac? I think almost certainly not. They've jumped on the bandwagon. That's with a suspect. Sometimes people jump on the bandwagon with a skeptical theory. They join in the naysaying crowd because it's just easier for them to defend that, or maybe they can comprehend that narrative more easily. Now, moving on to the next point. There is a channel out there that I talk about a lot called Marvelous Work and a Wonder. In fact, they're more of an organization, even though they have at least 3 YouTube channels, and their work is shared in a lot of different directions. They have 3 sides of their organization. Marvelous Work and a Wonder is one of them. They also have the Humanity Party, which is their political side, and the Real Illuminati, which is more of a mysterious angle, but they talk about all the secrets of the universe. And they have launched their own show, a new one actually, called Zeitgeist of Real Truth. And no matter what subject we're talking about, whether it's the Zodiac Killer, true crime, Jack the Ripper, Charles Manson, any subject under the sun, one thing that was shared on the first episode that I watched of Zeitgeist of the Real Truth was that the person who tells the best story can often have the biggest controlling effect. The person who tells the best story can often reach the most people. Now let's think about that in relation to the Zodiac Killer mystery. No matter what theory you're supporting, no matter what, whether it's involving one suspect or 2 suspects or 3, some people think that there were 9 suspects involved in each crime. Well, not each crime, but several of them. No matter what theory you're going with, the person who tells the best story will reach the most people. But one of the reasons why I like the true crime world is it's not a storytelling contest. Oh, people will try to sell you books showing off how they have composed the best story, and some people will truly identify certain outrageous aspects of the true crime world, and they'll put it all together in a book strung up with a bunch of far-out wacky ideas. Maybe some examples of this would be the Zodiac Manson connection, or to a certain extent Gareth Penn's Time 17 when he talked about Michael O'Hare as the Zodiac Killer, filling the mystery full of mathematical signatures, and that it's all about radians and Morse code and binary, and that was even perhaps adding in certain outrageous elements. If I could give you my own 2 cents on the subject, I think that Gareth Penn wanted to write a Zodiac Killer book, but he wanted to differentiate himself from Robert Graysmith, who put out his book in 1986, and also Gareth Penn just really wanted recognition for making some observations about the Zodiac Killer mystery. So then he started saying that this professor named Michael O'Hare was the Zodiac Killer, and he had all these mathematical reasons why, or showing off this and that, like about if you draw something like a square on the data pages of Michael O'Hare's PhD thesis, it will reveal some type of mathematical clue, and he looked at all types of angles and such. I think that he had certain observations, but he had to draw it out to a book-length version because he wanted recognition for his actual observations, and what he did was he filled it with more outrageous examples. Lots of people do this, and they have their reasons for doing it. Sometimes it's ethical, sometimes it's not. Most of the time I would propose that it is unethical, but what do you guys think? And moving on to the next point here, I did a recent episode on the channel talking about the Zodiac Killer BTK connection, and that was the debunking episode that came out before the Lawrence Kane one. But yes, there is a theory out there that BTK, the serial killer Dennis Rader, was the Zodiac Killer. BTK stood for Bind, Torture, and Kill. I think it's a very straightforward debunking episode because he most likely was out of the country for the entirety of the Zodiac crime spree from 68 to 69. If everything that his family says is true and everything that has been posted online about his military service is correct, that it's that he was stationed at Kadena Air Base in Japan from January of 1968 to June of 1968, and then, after Kadena Air Base, he was relocated to Tachikawa Air Force Base, also in Japan, from June of 1968 all the way to 1970, so he's completely out of the country, and unless someone can prove that he was in the country, I see no reason to entertain any type of Zodiac Killer BTK connection. But we have a comment from Rosie Martin who says, "Nice to actually see you, Ned. The debunking series is on video. I think it's safe to say that the whole theory is debunked. BTK was not in control of at least the initial murder scene that I'm aware of. Zodiac seemed far more aware of his surroundings. Also, apart from the pieces of Paul Stein's shirt used for mailings, he didn't take any trophies, did he? BTK seemed like a far more disorganized killer in my mind. Can't wait until your next episode." Hey, Rosie, much appreciated. Oh, absolutely, though. BTK was about taking trophies and, holding on to them. BTK was a home invader. And just listen to his name. Bind, torture, kill. Now, I said in a recent episode that I disagreed with the profiler Sharon Hagan when she said that the Zodiac Killer was not sadistic. Absolutely, the Zodiac was sadistic. He was a murderer. He tied up the victims at Lake Berryessa and he stabbed them. Oh, the Zodiac was an absolute sadist. But I think a better way of looking at it, and maybe Sharon and I would be in agreement on this, is that the Zodiac was not a torturer. BTK absolutely was, and I completely comprehend the narrative. The Zodiac Killer was a younger, inexperienced BTK, and then he developed those tendencies once he became a more honed serial killer. Yeah, well, if he's in Japan when this is all happening, he didn't teleport from Japan and do that, so no, I don't think that BTK was the Zodiac, but we should point out that BTK did write codes and make up cipher-like things, cryptograms of sorts. Not even going to elaborate on those too much because I don't want to misspeak. But this whole aspect of acting out sexual fantasies, by Dennis Rader's own admission, that's why BTK operated as a serial killer. He was acting out sexual fantasies. He said that there was this monster that lived in his brain called Factor X, which would take over and drive him to kill. Well, I don't think that's the Zodiac at all. The Zodiac does not seem like someone who's acting out sexual fantasies. And what really happened with the Lake Berryessa stabbing? I don't know. Why did he tie up the victims at that one point? I'm really not sure. Could it be that he was trying to recreate a previous crime, such as the Domingos Edwards murders in 1963? Maybe. Or was it something completely different? Was he just trying to get more media coverage around his crimes? Because Charles Manson had taken over the media storm in August of 1969. Not only Manson, I should say the Sharon Tate murders. Maybe that's a better way of looking at it. The murders as well of Wojtek Frykowski, Abigail Folger, J.C. Bring, Stephen Parent, and Lino and Rosemary LaBianca. I know that took a lot to say, but so we have to remember all the victims. But last week on the channel, I did several episodes about BTK, not only talking about the Zodiac Killer BTK connection, but I did a response to Dennis Rader's confession, and I also talked about some of the movies that depicted BTK online, and Shaper Art says that the BTK film from 2008 was a mess. The narrative and structure was all over the place, and there was no consistency with the story or timeline. I'm still a fan of Kane Hodder, who played Dennis Rader in that movie. Did a good acting job despite the poorly written script. And, oh yes, absolutely, if you ever do watch the movie BTK from 2008, it's just what Shaper Art said. It's not following the conventional BTK storyline. It's just showing little slices of him committing crimes, and I was trying to think of a synonym for the word slices because that's a really bad word to use when you're discussing a serial killer movie, but it's just that like you see like an action scene here, you see a crime scene there, and they aren't done in chronological order, and it's really just meant to highlight this is how BTK could have possibly committed some of the crimes. But as he said, Kane Hodder plays Dennis Rader in that movie, who was more famous for being Jason Voorhees in several Friday the 13th films. He was also Victor Crowley in the Hatchet movies, as well as playing Ed Gein, another serial killer in The Butcher of Plainfield. So I think that it was an extremely fast-moving film. Absolutely. Like, it felt like I had been watching it for 20 minutes and I hit pause once to get up, and an hour had gone by. It's all over the place and disorganized, but it is definitely a fast-moving film. And there's a BTK Zodiac comment from Classic Chevy Cat that says, "Thank you for doing the research for these shows. I enjoyed The Good Marriage." That's one with Anthony LaPaglia. Very tense. Such an odd relationship. When I watched that movie, I wondered how many family members know or knew about a serial killer without ever saying anything. Often I thought some family member knew about Zodiac. Perhaps someone will one day run across an old journal. We can hope, can't we? You know, I think about that so much, Classic Chevy Cat, that did somebody know? Okay, no matter what your theory is, even if you're like Dave and you think that this is the San Francisco Chronicle saying that someone is writing letters taking credit for murders that he didn't commit, right? Somebody murdered those people in 1968 and 69. And I'm so tempted to believe that somebody actually knows. Now, some serial killers do not have accomplices. Let's be very clear about that. But she's talking about the movie A Good Marriage, which is based on a Stephen King novella, and it has Anthony LaPaglia playing this serial killer, and the movie is really about his wife discovers that her husband is a serial killer like BTK. So I think that doesn't spoil anything because that's just the premise of the film. That's what it's about. Well, now if somebody were to learn that their husband was the Zodiac killer, what would they do? Or even if it's not the husband, what if it's someone's brother, like which I explore in Zodiac the Linkletter Connection? As I said, you can always like and subscribe, follow along with these discussions. So I definitely think that somebody would know something out there. And I had one question that was sent to me. Do you think the Zodiac killer is still alive? And the honest answer is, if there's any type of multiple killers arrangement, I would think that at least one of them would still be alive. If there's a single killer, probably not, because even though I was a little bit hard on Dave M., who left that comment at the beginning, I think that a lot of people would have passed away since 1969. Many of the Zodiac killer suspects are dead. I was talking about Lawrence Kane or Richard Gaikowski. They've passed away. Lots of them passed away in the first decade of the new millennium. And as I said, I do the Zodiac Killer debunking series, and in the debunking series, I talked about Jack Torrance. I said I would never do a profile video on him, but he fit nicely into the Zodiac debunking episodes because I absolutely do not believe that Jack Torrance was the Zodiac Killer. He was the guy that was brought forward by his stepson, Dennis Kaufman, and Jack Torrance is another suspect that has passed away. And we had a comment come in from James on the debunking episode. The handwriting of Jack Torrance matches the Zodiac Killer's writing. You can't just pluck someone out of millions of people and get lucky like that. There's a match. That hood and knife could have been planted by Jack himself to throw off whoever found them. The Lake Berryessa killer could have been a copycat. Meaning that Dennis Kaufman says that he found a knife that had blood on it, as well as the Lake Berryessa hood, in some type of audio equipment thingamabob, and that it belonged to Jack Torrance, but it looks absolutely nothing like the Zodiac Killers, that the way that Brian Hartnell described it. It seems to have just a yellow circle and a line going through it, and I mean, well, that's your theory? That's your theory that, okay, no, this guy isn't lying and saying that he found a barbecue knife, whatever that is, with blood on it, and he found a Lakeberry as a hood. No, that was the real Zodiac killer's, but he didn't use that knife and he didn't use that hood. He planted them there to make you think that he was not the Zodiac killer. I was hard on Dave, but James, whew. You know that expression, if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all? Okay, I won't. I was trying to stay calm. To be clear, I absolutely do not believe that Jack Torrance was the Zodiac killer, and I think that his stepson, Dennis Kaufman, put forward a very poor attempt at convincing anybody, and he may have been a genuine fraud. And our next question comes to us from Toxgoy, who asks, "Hi Ned, I love your show. I have two questions for you that maybe you could use in a Zodiac Mondays episode. The first is, do you believe the Axeman of New Orleans was an inspiration for the Zodiac killer? And the second question is, what do you think about the Axeman suspect Joseph Mumfree?" To give a very brief response to the first question, no. If I had to bet my life on it, I would say that the Axeman was perhaps not an inspiration for the Zodiac. And the reason is, I have not seen an ounce of evidence that suggests that the Zodiac killer had any type of connection to New Orleans or paying any homage to the Axeman. And that set of crimes took place in 1918 and 1919. Instead, I would propose that both the Axeman of New Orleans and the Zodiac killer were inspired by Jack the Ripper, because there are a lot of similarities, and the Zodiac, even more so, has similarities with the Ripper, because with the Axeman of New Orleans, there's really just one piece of writing that is taking credit for the crimes and threatening the public, and I don't believe that that letter was actually written by the real killer. Instead, that mostly seems like a prankster or a hoaxer, and a hoaxer with a calculating reason. That's the one that says, if there isn't a jazz band playing, then I'm going to attack you. More or less, I'm paraphrasing, but that's the gist of the letter. So, about Joseph Mumfree as an Axeman suspect, again, I think that's an interesting question, especially because I had the opportunity to discuss that with Miriam C. Davis, who's the author of The Axeman of New Orleans. I contacted her last year when I did my 4-part series on the Axeman, and I said, "Hello, my name is Ned DeHaan. I'm the host of BlackBoxOnlineRadio, and I'm doing a series on the New Orleans Axeman. Would you like to give a comment for my show?" And what she said is that she wrote the book The Axeman of New Orleans, and it is the only book that is exclusively dedicated to the Axeman at the time of writing that email. And other books have a chapter or a section that is devoted to the Axeman, most notably Ready to Hang by Robert Talan, another writer from New Orleans. But the second thing that she said was the conclusion of her book was that Joseph Mumfree could not be the Axeman, and she could prove it. So that is explored throughout the book. And I also began to ask her a few more questions, like, what do you think of this whole Axeman hoax theory about how someone was writing letters taking credit for murders that he didn't commit, and this was created by the newspapers and the media in New Orleans? And the response that she gave to me was that, firstly, she believes that there are two sets of Axeman crimes, some that occurred in possibly 1910 to 1912 or 13, thereabouts, earlier murders, and then there's the Axeman crimes that occurred in 1918, 1919, because if you had asked me a year and a half ago when was the New Orleans Axeman operating, I would have said in 1912. That's the number that stood out in my mind. Those earlier crimes are what are known as the cleaver murders or the cleaver attacks, and someone was stealing a cleaver from butcher shops or other places and would attack people. And Miriam C. Davis has this theory that there was indeed an Axeman, but he actually committed more crimes than he has given credit for, and some of the other crimes that he had committed were not actually him. So the official narrative is heavily disputed by Miriam C. Davis, and she explores a lot of this in her book, and you can hear numerous interviews with her online, as well as listening to my 4-part series on the New Orleans Axeman. So, I would like to go back to the first question, though, because I'm just really not seeing anything in the Zodiac Killer's material that would even suggest for a second that the Zodiac had anything to do with the New Orleans Axeman. The Axeman was a home invader who attacked people while they were sleeping, and the Axeman also stole weapons, like most notably the axe or the cleaver, if Miriam's theory is correct. But with the axe, that was just something that was easily available. Lots of people had wood-burning stoves. Someone could find an axe on someone's property very easily. And the Zodiac did absolutely none of that. The Zodiac did not operate with blunt force trauma or bludgeoning anybody, definitely not going into homes. And there's also this alternative theory out there that the Axeman was working with the Italian mafia in New Orleans. I know a lot of people think about the French influence on Louisiana, right? But the Italians are also very much there, and there's here some type of discrimination going on. Possibly someone is going after Sicilian grocers, like people who are running grocery stores of Sicilian descent or origin, and they may have actually been committing extortion practices. By they, I mean the people who orchestrated this, and there's this practice called the Black Hand. Maybe people don't want to pay bribes, or people have shadowy debts that we don't know about, and they were targeted specifically. So that would tie into the theory that Miriam Davis has put forward. But, it's a mystery. It's an unsolved case. I just don't see those types of details in the Zodiac Killer mystery. Now, the Phantom Killer from Texarkana in 1946. Absolutely, there are influences that could be tied to the Zodiac case, such as attacking couples at lovers' lanes or attacking a man and a woman in a car, wearing the hood, for example, being a hooded serial killer, deviating from the pattern in the final crime, and both the Phantom Killer and the Zodiac ended up with 5 total victims, and they had unsuccessful murders. And some people have also pointed out that the Phantom Killer murdered somebody named Betty Jo Booker, and the Zodiac murdered someone named Betty Lou Jensen. That there might even be some similarities in the letters of their names, and I personally think that Betty Jo and Betty Lou were just very common names at the time, because when I was researching the case of the Sodder children, I was trying to find a particular name of somebody who lived in Texas named Frankie, and Frankie Joe was actually a very common name for girls at the time, and then you'll just find those things, Betty Joe, Frankie Joe. It was absolutely very common. Even one of the most annoying teachers I ever had in elementary school was named Betty Joe, or maybe it was Betsy Joe or something. I remember her last name, but I won't say it on the air because she was a blanking blank. Sorry, a little bit of childhood resentment came out there. But it really is a good question, because you see these strong similarities among Jack the Ripper and the Phantom Killer and the Zodiac Killer. The New Orleans Axeman is similar but different at the same time, and one reason could be that the Axeman was not a braggadocio. He wasn't someone who's trying to showcase his crimes to the entire world the way the Zodiac and the Ripper did. And as I said, Miriam Davis's theory is that some of the crimes that have been attributed to him were not him, and some of them that were not attributed to him should be him. But there is a serial killer that was operating at the time in New Orleans. I know it sounds a little bit confusing, but I think you guys can stay with it. However, I think it's important to note, though, that the Axeman crimes starting in 1918 are 30 years after Jack the Ripper in 1888, so there's another numerical similarity. And then you have the Zodiac Killer in 1968, so that is, is that, yeah, 80 years after the Ripper, but that number 8 comes up again, and, I mean, what do you do with the Phantom Killer, though? So any type of numerical pattern seems messed up to a certain degree there. But you guys can always weigh in the description box down below if you have something about the New Orleans Axeman. I would love to read it. And I have one more piece of Zodiac news and info for you guys. There's a book out there called The Age of Zodiac by Michael Benson. and I was going to devote a large portion of this episode to that subject, to the material that is mentioned in his book. However, as I was flipping through it, I found that he had a chapter on the Black Sapphire murder that occurred in 1965, so please look out for a future episode on that one here on Black Box Online Radio. And just to give you a preview of what that would look like, some people believe that there were pre-Zodiac crimes, that the Zodiac killer was not just some guy who committed a year-long murder spree in California in 1968 to 69. Instead, they think that he was someone who began perhaps as early as 1962 and then went all the way to 1970, maybe beyond 81, 86, not really sure, pre-Zodiac crimes and post-Zodiac crimes. But one thing that's never really made sense to me is, why would somebody commit a crime in 1962, commit one in 62, meaning the murder of Ray Davis, 1963, the Domingos Edwards murders, 64 would be the Swindle murders, but what happened in 1965? Well, Michael Benson proposes that there was indeed a Zodiac crime that took place called the Black Sapphire murder, and I will be doing an episode about that in the future here on Black Box Online Radio. As I said, you can always like and subscribe to follow along with all of these true crime discussions. And I was truly unprepared for entering into this aspect of the true crime world. Back in 2020, several people began writing into the channel saying that they liked what I was saying about the Zodiac Killer, or I was just doing a daily segment. Sometimes I'd talk about the Zodiac Killer, sometimes I would talk about any subject under the sun. I did a response to John Bolton, the former National Security Advisor. Any subject was fair game. It was just a daily YouTube segment that usually had a black box and some pink bubbles floating around on it. And a lot of people were requesting to hear more and more about the Zodiac Killer. And there's another reason why I decided to do the multi-part series on the Linkletter connection, talking not only about Robert Linkletter as a Zodiac Killer suspect, but about the suspicious death of his sister, was the thing that I was unprepared for was that there were so many crimes and stories that are connected to the Zodiac Killer mystery that are either loosely Zodiac related or the relationship is just questionable. For example, some people think that the Phantom Killer from Texarkana in 1946 was the Zodiac Killer. Or how about the Zodiac Unabomber connection? Or what a lot of theorists like to do is they like to talk about how their Zodiac Killer suspect could have been the person responsible for the crimes that took place in 1968 and 69, but also committed an additional crime. You'll see this all the time. Gareth Penn was a very large pioneer in this form of research because he believed that his Zodiac suspect, Michael O'Hare, committed the 1981 murder of Joan Webster in Massachusetts. And I even said that the Massachusetts connection is also a plausible title for his Zodiac book, Times 17, or perhaps even The Second Power. That was his follow-up book. And there's another loosely connected Zodiac crime, or I shouldn't say loosely connected. Someone has tried to establish a Zodiac connection to the suspect Robert Ivan Nichols, who was featured in one episode on this channel called Zodiac Robert Ivan Nichols AMA, and that is the murder of Amy Mihailovich. But these things happen all the time, whether I have a whole playlist of these episodes, actually, not only Michael O'Hare and the murder of Joan Webster, but also Gareth Penn and the murder of Nikki Benedict. And I was even talking about that suspect that I learned about recently, George Senda, how he has also been accused of the murder of his father, Anton Senda. These things happen all the time. People are always formulating some way of tying their Zodiac suspect to an additional crime. And there was one request that was made on the channel about making a list of them, and I did that last year for the ones that I knew about, and that was featured on the channel Horizon Eye Productions. I collaborated with that YouTube channel, and it's called The World of the Zodiac Killer, 50 Years of Terror, which is more or less just an attempt to make a list of possible, I repeat, possible Zodiac crimes out there, and even including things like the Phantom Killer, as I said. The Black Dahlia Avenger was also featured on that list, just about how a theorist thinks that their suspect also committed additional murders that other people aren't aware of. There are many theorists out there, And my world got really changed when I began learning about the death of Diane Linkletter, because for the first time on this channel, I was doing an episode that was Zodiac related, but at the same time it wasn't related, and that was just the first step in that direction. And there's a whole world of true crime that is centered in California in the 1960s, but it just goes all around the world, and I have not found any limit to that. But there is one question that I can indeed answer. Why would a hypothetical serial killer operate in 1962, 63, but not 65, or I should have said 62, 63, 64, the Swindle murders, but not 65, commit a crime in 66, like the murder of Sherry Jo Bates, for example, not 1967, and then kill 5 people from 68 to 69? What would drive somebody to do that? Now, there is a more appropriate term out there, but I call it the frustrated serial killer. I heard about this on Stephanie Harlow's channel, actually, when she was talking about how some people are serial killers, but they do not do it because of sexual urges exactly. Instead, they do it when they are experiencing low points in their life. Maybe they've had a breakup with an intimate partner. Maybe they've lost their job and they're going through a stretch of unemployment. They are experiencing something that is driving them toward an emotional low, or maybe a different type of low. Maybe it's a sexual low, so to speak. That, as I said, they lost their intimate partner, or they've experienced some type of embarrassment, as opposed to someone who's feeling a sexual urge, someone who just feels heartbroken, for example. And they resort to doing very destructive things. They resort to very heinous and sadistic actions, and that's why they commit murders. So there are other people out there, though, like Michael Cole, for example, author of the Zodiac Revisited trilogy, and he has proposed that the Zodiac was a very calculating serial killer, that somebody started in 1963 with the Domingos Edwards murders, and that these things were by design, there are specific reasons. It's meant to be more or less a serial killer masterpiece. There are things that are tied into the compass rose and the nautical compass rose specifically, and angles are lining up in certain ways, and he has his own very articulate reason for thinking that. I have 3 episodes out on the channel about him. I've also interviewed Michael Cole on the Zodiac Killer channel's Interview with the Expert series, so there are numerous reasons why someone could have been an infrequent serial killer. And as far as I know, Michael Cole hasn't commented on the Black Sapphire murder. I didn't learn about it till I was reading this book here, The Age of Zodiac, but please look out for that in the future. Now, I said that I would stay and talk to you guys for a while, and because you guys were leaving in questions about all kinds of subjects, and one of them came in from the Bible group, who was asking me about something that I said during the St. Patrick's Day episode, when I was talking about being weird in my younger days, back in high school and such. The Bible group says, "Hi Ned, could you please share with us some of the weird faces and weird voices and weird actions you expressed as a teenager? Time to shine, thanks." Well, what a brilliant question, but to be honest, I don't really know if it would make sense without context. What I was talking about was, in high school, I didn't spend a lot of time with other people. I would go to school and I would mostly go home because I lived in this little house in the forest of West Virginia, not even in a town or anything, just a cabin in the sticks. Okay, it wasn't a cabin, it was more of a functional house. It looked a little bit like a cabin. I'm only saying that because it was really far out, but to get to the point, I would go to school, then I would just go home, maybe watch an hour of TV, and other than that, I spent most of my time alone. I would put my headphones on, listening to my CD player over and over again, just the same songs on repeat. And sometimes I would turn toward independent movies, became a big fan of those, BBC America, British television, and they really shaped my personality and my sense of humor, and I would start acting like the characters from these sitcoms or from these films, and I'm just kind of like trying to be funny, and mostly I was just trying to entertain myself. But all I will say is, if I were acting like a character from a TV show or a movie when I'm in class or at the lunch table or something, sometimes I would act like I was the star of the show. And other people didn't always take kindly to that, because somebody who's like the class clown is going to be like, hey, no, I'm the funny one. Or somebody who's like the head honcho type is like, no, I'm the one who's in charge around here. You're trying to act like you're the star of the show. No, you're not. Just sit there and listen to me while I talk. And this is one of the reasons why conventionally mean people usually have a group around them, because if they didn't have a group around them, then they wouldn't have anyone to be mean to. And I think that doesn't require too much of an explanation. But thank you for the question all the same. Manic Eptopode has one that says, Ned, you are among the very best on YouTube. I would say I hope your channel gets bigger, but I sort of enjoy how BBOR is a niche thing. Anyway, looking forward to the future of BBOR. I'm a huge fan, and the rapport you build with your audience is really nice. It came out in this episode. Oh yeah, during the St. Patrick's Day celebration. I mean, that was made for you guys. But I completely follow everything you're saying, Manic Eptopode, and in the past, as I said, I would just do these little 20-minute recordings every day, make one every day. It was completely easy and feasible to keep up with, because I would just talk to you guys about what I was doing. Then with the 3-day-a-week format, it definitely takes more time to edit a video as opposed to just putting pink bubbles on it. But still, that's somewhat doable. To do the show 7 days a week, if I didn't have to work a day job, of course I could, but life outside of the internet, blah. I just want to do this all day. I just want to connect with you guys every single day and, make a life out of it. But I love getting your comments, and I know most of you in the comments section. Of course, we get new listeners from time to time, but I completely follow what you're saying, that when someone starts listening to the show regularly, I know who you are, I know where you're from, and you, of course, get to hear all about me. It's good stuff. And there's a comment that came in from Sobek Lord that says, Hi Ned, back in high school I watched a lot of Jerry Springer and Maury. The last time I watched any daytime TV talk shows was nearly 15 years ago. During a brief stint of unemployment, Steve Wilkos was pretty dope. Take care. Hey Sobek Lord, thanks for the comment. On a recent episode, I responded to the Steve Wilkos show. It was something that I had been meaning to do for a while, because I was a big follower of the Steve Wilkos show for about 10 years. And he was the former head of security on Jerry Springer, who got his own talk show that dealt with more serious issues. And I wanted to talk about the true crime aspects of it, because he deals with real true crime cases, and sometimes he even talks about some of the more high-profile ones that get mentioned in the media. But the true crime cases that get mentioned on the Steve Wilkos show cover everything from something involving abuse to children to actual murders that have been committed, or sometimes there have been people who've been involved for murder for hire plots. Lots of true crime material on the Steve Wilkos show. And I have to give a shout out to Julie Ann, whom I was debating with in the comments section, because I think it was one of the few times that a true crime case or true crime subject was actually suitable to debate. And Julie was responding to 3 points that I made during that episode, and those were that, number one, I think that lie detectors are much more accurate than people think. Number two, sometimes you can get deceived, like you think that the person who's a guest on the show is going to be telling the truth, and then it turns out that they are not. And the third was the one that Julie was actually talking about, where she wanted to challenge me when I said that, as a talk show host, Steve Wilkos didn't seem to be taking into account that some of his guests might be committing inappropriate actions because they are dealing with mental illnesses, particularly depression or some other type of depressive disorder. Julie was responding to this because of her own personal experiences, talking about how she had been diagnosed with more than one mental illness, and it is no excuse for committing any type of abusive action, and you shouldn't go easy on someone just for that. And what I was trying to say was that, okay, that is the problem, but what is the solution? The solution would not be to get in someone's face, yell at them, and humiliate them on national television. This person needs things like counseling, or perhaps medication, maybe another form of therapy, maybe even lifestyle coaching. They don't need whatever's going on the Steve Wilkos show. And if you haven't seen that, he's the guy who would get very angry, tell abusers not to sit on his stage, and he would throw the chair against the wall and such. But his brand of what he called tough love I thought was not appropriate for everyone. And Julie responded by saying that if someone is dealing with a mental illness, it's not that they aren't aware of their mental faculties. If they have children, it's their responsibility to get treatment and counseling on their own before any of these problems happen. If they've gotten to the level where they are abusing their children or even neglecting their children, and some people go on to commit larger crimes such as molestation and rape, then there is absolutely no reason to go easy on anyone because of those actions. They are responsible and they have to deal with the consequences. And I mean, you guys can weigh in the comments section down below. One point, though, that I think is perhaps not open for an enormous amount of debate is it is purely inappropriate, so says me, to equate someone who is a rapist with someone who has neglected their children because they are dealing with depression. I completely understand how Julie is saying that it's your responsibility to get treatment. The problem is people with behavioral disorders don't always follow the rules. These are disorders. I mean, that's the very nature of having a disorder. But I can appreciate a good debate, and if you guys want to weigh in the comments section down below. But I would more like to know your response to this particular challenge question. Do you believe shows like Steve Wilkos, we also said Maury, or even Dr. Phil, for example, are doing more harm than good? Like, do you think that those shows are beneficial, or are they harmful to the people who go on them? Now, there was the British talk show host, Jeremy Kyle, who got into some trouble because one guest committed suicide after going on to his show, and then he was pulled off the air for a while. I mean, some people become the focus of blame like that. I found that Dr. Phil tends to come under fire for different reasons. He's not exactly like Steve Wilkos, who, as I said, is just very angry, gets in people's faces and yells at them. And okay, I mean, that's not really the worst things that he's ever done. That's just the first one that came off the top of my head. But with Dr. Phil, he gets accused of interviewing people who aren't completely aware of their mental faculties, like interviewing people who are clearly dealing with some very intense mental illness, much beyond simply depression. And, like, for example, he did the interview with Shelley Duvall, who was the actress featured in Popeye, as well as the movie The Shining, playing Jack Nicholson's wife. And she was clearly completely, like, mentally unstable. She was talking about Robin Williams and saying he's not here right now, he's shape-shifting. She had lost all awareness of her mental faculties for the majority of the interview. And after the interview, Dr. Phil and his company paid for her to have mental health treatment, and that's their defense, that the reason why they do things like that, the reason why they have the TV show is because then they can use the financial resources from the TV show to get people mental health treatment and such, and that's the only way that they would have the ability to do so. Another lesser-known example is when Dr. Phil was talking to someone, just a guest on his show, about how the government is coming after him, and people in the comments section were just saying, okay, this guy's completely deranged. He thinks that people in the government are coming after him, and he needs to put plastic rings on his fingers to keep them away. This guy is clearly not sane. He is dealing with some type of delusional disorder, and Dr. Phil is trying to debate him. Oh, yeah? Well, what's so special about you? And they were like, that's just completely ineffective. And that's more or less what I was saying about the Steve Wilkos show. I completely understand what Julie was talking about with his points, that saying that she doesn't care what happens to people who have done bad things. And my response was, well, I don't care so much about what happens to people who've done bad things either, but you have a problem, and how do you solve the problem? And this is an effective way, and your way seems to be a little bit ineffective. I'm hardly trying to be nice or just demanding that anybody be nice. I'm demanding that people be practical, more or less. And there is one final question I'd like to get to, and that is from Rosie, when she says, do you think polygraph tests should be admissible in court? because I was talking about lie detectors on the Steve Wilkos episode, and I was saying that I think that lie detectors are actually much more accurate than a lot of other people do. For example, Dr. Todd Grande simply said, "There's no reason to look at polygraph tests. They are nothing but nonsense." And I don't quite agree with that. I actually think that they are fairly accurate, but should they be admissible in court? No. I am forced to say that. Okay, well, how about a more honest answer? Dan Rebikoff, who appeared on the Steve Wilkos show, who does the lie detector test, says that the polygraph is actually admissible in 20 states, maybe more now, and they're also frequently used by the FBI and the military. So they are admissible in court in some parts of the United States of America. That's the most honest answer. But should they be admissible nationwide, I think is the question. No, for the following reason. You just don't quite know. I mean, even if something is like going to be 97 or 98% accurate, what if that sends somebody to jail? What if that's the tipping point and someone is just going to be like, oh, this person failed a polygraph test, the jury's going to hear that, and that's the only thing that truly gets them convicted? But what if it's not accurate? If it were 100% or something, or let's say perhaps if somebody had things like DNA. Okay, you find this person's DNA at the crime scene. More often than not, that person was at the crime scene. I think that the risk of DNA transfer in some instances is, well, less than 1%. The way that some of these shocking stories happen, DNA is a little bit more reliable than a polygraph test. But also, polygraph tests include something called a forensic interview, where the person has to find out if they are a testable subject, and the interviewer can be mistaken. They're just... I don't believe we're at a level when we can convincingly say that a polygraph test is going to be so accurate that it's infallible, so I have to say no. But about DNA, I've told you guys before that I'm a big fan of the program Crime After Crime, hosted by Daniel Hallen and John Lorden. And one of their stories, this one guy's DNA was found at a crime scene. I believe it was on the victim's body, but what happened was he had passed out and had been taken to the hospital, and the same paramedics had gone to the crime scene, and they were trying to resuscitate the victim, and the paramedics had transferred his DNA to the victim's body, and it's on their equipment, and I think you can get the idea. So then his DNA's at a crime scene and with a victim that he had absolutely nothing to do with. And those things can happen. Oh yes, DNA can be fallible, and DNA can lead to some misleading conclusions. But I think that those are the exceptions that prove the rule. If somebody's DNA is left behind, firstly, is it touch DNA, or is it something like blood or semen? Those would be much more difficult to explain about why those would be left behind at a crime scene. The point is, things like DNA are more reliable than pieces of evidence such as lie detector tests. But let me rephrase this for you guys. Even if a lie detector test is 80% accurate, that means more often than not it's accurate. Even if it's 70% accurate, more often than not it's accurate, but not to the point where it is completely reliable. I mean, 70%, that means nothing. I mean, like, this is true, not with lie detectors, but with voice stress analysis. Say, for example, if you have 7 blue items and 3 red items, and you mix them together in a bag and you reach in and you pull one out, there's a 30% chance that you'll pull out the red item. It could happen. It's not some type of statistical impossibility. I mean, even if the odds are 1,000,000 to 1, you could still pull out the red item, but 30%, absolutely that's possible. And if it's 80%, then you would have 8 blue items and 2 red items. That could still happen. I mean, so in terms of those percentages, I think that the majority of the time it's still going to be the blue item, but then there are going to be times when it's only going to be the red item, so that's not good enough for court. But according to Dan Rebikoff, who does the Steve Wilkos show, the computerized polygraph test is 98% accurate. I don't know if it's that accurate. I definitely think he's hyping that up a little bit, but that's still perhaps the majority of the people who are tested on the show have accurate results, especially if they aren't using countermeasures. And that's the final point about lie detectors. If anything, it shows you that some people will attempt to use countermeasures, whether it's the squeezing of their butt cheeks or rolling their toes. Oh, have you heard about that one, actually? There's this rumor on the internet that if you squeeze your butt cheeks together when you're getting a polygraph test, you will pass. So what they do is they put sensors in the cushions, like in the seat cushions, and then they can actually monitor whether or not someone is trying to squeeze their butt together excessively. I know it sounds silly, but they say that that's like a real thing that people do. I've seen it on the Steve Wilkos show. It's definitely real. So it would just beg the question, why is somebody trying to use a countermeasure if they are telling the truth? And I don't know. I don't know. But anyway, you can weigh it in the comments section if you want about what do you think about lie detector tests? Do you think that they're accurate? If you want to challenge me on any of these points, feel free to do so. And you can also respond to any of the Zodiac Killer material that has been mentioned in this. And please look out for Zodiac Killer, the Link Letter Connection, coming out on Wednesday. And then, of course, an Anything Goes Friday segment. And in the near future, I'll be doing something on the Black Sapphire murder from 1965. Okay, well, that's all from me now. See you on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.